Do you have kids on your list this year? Whether you're getting ready to deck the halls or light the menorah and spin the dreidel, this video has 6 full tutorials of fantastic things that you can sew for kids. From reading pillows to quillows, crayon roll-ups to pillowcases, I've got lots of ideas that are sure to please. So take a look. You can look in the description below to see the timestamps where you can start each of the different tutorials. And a lot of these projects have printed tutorials that you can purchase from my Etsy shop, or they are also available to my members in my Sew with Tara Reid membership. If you want to check it out and see if it's for you, you can try it for only $1. I popped a link right there, or you can also find it below the video. Hi, this is Tara Reid and welcome to my sewing studio. As you can see, I have been very busy playing with Santa pants. That's what I am calling this pattern, Santa Pants Sack. And I'm going to show you how to do this medium size. It is 16 by 20 if you keep it flat, but I'm also going to show you how to do that built-in box bottom. They are fully lined, so they'll last and you can use them year after year. This could become your official Santa gift bag for your family. Totally up to you. I played with machine embroidery, added a name on there. I think that is so cute. So if you have an embroidery machine, that might be something you want to add. You can get this pattern for this medium size and the template for the buckle. There's a link in the description below this video. Or if you want the pattern for all 3 sizes, this cute little double drawstring, the medium and the large, you can find that link as well in my Etsy shop. So who is ready to sew for Christmas? I know I am. Let's get started. Let's talk about the supplies we need to make this 16 by 20 lined Santa sack. The first thing we're going to need is 2 pieces in white for the lining. Then we'll need some pins, rotary cutter, rulers. I also like to use this little 3-inch ruler, but you can use a regular ruler as well when we're cutting out the box corners. I like this heat erasable Frixion pen. Then you're going to do strips of fabric, white, red, black, and red. And there's 2 of each of these. And in the description below, you can find a link to get all of the details for this size. The link will also include a template for the buckle. Then we're going to applique that on. And I just put fusible webbing on the back. So then you'll need yellow thread for that applique. Otherwise, I'm going to be working with white. You're also going to need some cord or ribbon or string, whatever you want to use for the drawstring for this bag. I have some nylon poly cord that I got that I will be using. Your sewing machine, of course, and an ironing board. So I'm just moving my second set of everything so that I can show you how we're going to do this. Basically, we're going to sew these strips together. So you're going to put them, and since I'm just using solids, there's no real right or wrong side, but we're going to sew along there. We're going to sew the white to the red, then the black to the red, then the red to the black. So the front and the back are going to look like this. Then on one side, you're going to applique your buckle in the center. Just going to sew down the 4 sections that we pinned together with a 1/4-inch seam. Just easy, straight sewing. And now I'm going to daisy chain these, which basically means I'm just going to feed this one in right after that one without cutting the thread. It'll have a little piece of thread between the 2. Then I'm just going to knot on either side and keep sewing. So you just have that much thread in between when you daisy chain. I know a lot of you will already know this, but everybody learns it at some time, and maybe it's on this video. So I'm just going to snip these apart. And then I'm going to take it to the ironing board and I'm going to press them so that the seams go towards the red on the red and white or towards the black on the black and red. Then I'm going to pin them back together and come back here. I've pressed the seams towards the black and towards the red on the red and white. And then I have pinned these together with the black and the red matching. And we're going to sew, and I did that for both halves. So we're just going to, more straight stitching, sew these together. Now we have our 2 fronts. And we have our lining, and you will notice that they are not the same height, and that is intentional because we're going to create a drawstring bag with this section, and this is going to get tucked under. So just know, don't panic, that is deliberate. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to put the buckle onto one of these sides. So this is going to be the back. Santa only buckles his pants on one side, not the front and the back. And in the directions, I'll give you the template to make this, so it'll be super easy for you. So first you just need to find the center. You're just going to fold that in half so you know how to place this down. You're just going to make sure that fold is right in the center of the buckle. I am using a Pellon pressure sensitive webbing. You don't have to iron it. Get that centered and make sure it's pretty even above and below the belt. You also want to make sure any longer threads come off the sides because we're going to applique. I'm going to use a zigzag applique, and we don't want it to have a bunch of little threads coming off the side. You can also fix that at your sewing machine if you want to. So now we're going to go back to the machine and do a little zigzag. Then we'll come back and I'll show you how we're going to put the bag together. I've changed my plate and my presser foot so that I can do a zigzag stitch. And then I just wanted to show you the settings. I'm doing 0.75 for how close together the stitches are going to be and a 3.5 for how wide the stitches are going to be. So just look at your machine. I'm using a Janome M7 Continental. Look at your machine and set that up. Oh, and I've also chosen a right needle position. This has a middle and a right needle position for the zigzag because that's going to help me to set exactly where that needle goes in so that I can stitch perfectly around this Santa buckle. So let's get stitching. The first thing you need to do is make sure you're putting your needle down right outside the edge of your buckle. So I'm going to eyeball it and then I'm going to put the foot down. And then if I move it by hand, I can see where that's going to enter without actually letting it go into the fabric. And it's still a little bit over from where I want it. So I'm going to adjust that. Okay, so I'm happy with where it is. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up my bobbin thread so that I don't get a bird's nest knot under there. So I'm going to hold the top thread, press the bobbin down or the needle down up, and then you can see that bobbin popped up. So now I'm going to grab both of these threads, put them under the foot, and I'm going to hold them and do a little knot. Now I'm just pulling them behind so they don't get pulled into all of my stitching. And now I'm just going to stitch around the outside with a zigzag to applique this on, and then we will switch and we will do the inside. You want to go slow so that you know your needle is going to stop on the right-hand side of your yellow when you turn your fabric 90 degrees. Now when your fabric is to the right of your foot and your line, then you're going to be pretty good with getting these corners correct. We're going to have to do a little bit of back stitching when we're doing the inside though, because we're going to be going the opposite direction. So we're going to start off the same way. We're going to make sure we have that needle where we want it to be, just inside the black. I'm going to pull that bobbin thread up. Okay, I want to really zoom in so you can see what's happening here. I can't get the foot off while the needle's in there. Okay, don't do this at home. This is just so that I can show you what's going on. So when we turn it, the next stitch I'm going to draw on here because this is a heat erasable pen. So I'm going to just draw right there. That next stitch is going to go right there. Okay. But these stitches end here. So you can either just go for it and go on and have this gap of the width of your stitches in your applique, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to backstitch to this line and then keep going. So you do need to do that on each corner when you're doing the inside of your Santa belt. I'm going to start by going in reverse, probably 3 stitches. So now I'm going to go forward and we're going to do the same thing at this next corner. So have you done applique before? Do you love applique? Are you not sure about applique? This is pretty easy, just straight lines. Great introduction if you've never done it before, but let me know in the comments. How do you feel about it? What's your expertise? Do you want to see more of it? Let me know. And when we get back to the beginning, you're just going to go to the end, not just to the end of the black, but to the end of the stitching so that you have nice blocks of stitching around there, and then you can knot that off. Now we have the front of the bag done and the back of the bag done. So this is going to be the outside and some lint. That's going to be the outside, and then we still have our 2 pieces of white. Next, you need to decide, do you want to make a box bottom bag or do you just want to do a simple bag where you're going to sew around and whatever you put in the bag creates the shape for it? If you want to do the simplest way, then what you're going to do now is you're going to pin or clip these together, right sides together, and you're going to sew all 3 of these sides, leave the top open. Then you're going to take the lining. You're going to sew down and here, leaving space open at the bottom for turning. So that's if you're doing the simplest. But I'm going to show you how to put a box bottom on this. So just skip ahead to the next step if you've decided, nope, you don't want to do that. So I'm going to take a little square ruler just because it's nice and handy, and we are going to draw and cut out a 3-inch square on each corner. So I have these layered together. So I'm going to cut both halves at the same time. We're going to do it to the front, and the outside, and the lining. And this is going to give us a 6-inch box bottom on the bottom of our bag. So if you want it to be smaller, if you want 5 inches, you're going to do 2.5-inch square. See how that math works? It's double. The width of your box bottom is double what you cut out. Now, what I often do is I'll use a rotary cutter most of the way, and then I will just take scissors and snip to that corner because I don't want to cut too far. I don't want to cut into what's going to be the corner of the bag. Before I move this and cut the bottom out of the lining, I'm going to pin this together. And for the outside of your bag, we're going to sew both sides and straight across the bottom. You don't do anything here. We're going to do that later. So now I have my 2 lining pieces together, and I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to cut the 3-inch box bottom out of the bottom corners. Okay, and just like the other one, we're going to pin these 3 sides together. We want to make sure we leave a few inches of the bottom of the lining open so that we can turn this project when we get it sewn together. One thing I love about this project, it is all straight stitches. So it's a great beginner project, pretty quick and easy. So now we're just going to do the straight stitching. I'm going to be doing the outside first. So I'm going to go down, fully down both sides and across the bottom. Now you do want to make sure that this seam stays towards the black. So what I usually do is I just take scissors, or you can get a stiletto tool or something else, but scissors work great. I always have them next to my sewing machine, and I just press that down to keep my fingers away from that needle. Now we're going to stitch all the way across the bottom. We're skipping the cutout. Don't do anything with that yet. And now all the way up the other side. Now you do the same thing to the lining, but since it's white on a white machine, it's kind of hard to see. And because there's going to be a bit of pressure on this area when you're turning this rather large bag right side out, I'm not just going to do a simple knot. I'm going to go back and forth twice to reinforce that area better. Now we are going to make our box bottoms. So what you're going to do is you're going to open this up, the cut lines. You're going to match these 2 seams. And I like to put the seams to either side. So see how these seams are both going this way and these are going this way? That just decreases the bulk. And then you're just going to fold this out, match those raw edges. You're going to match those raw edges. And then you're just going to sew straight across there. So you're just going to sew straight across there with a 1/4-inch seam. So this is just a different way of making a box bottom. Instead of having these big points come out and then using a ruler and drawing a line and then trimming it, you can cut out a square in the beginning and then just pin them together, and you don't have stitching later. So you're cutting at one point or another, but this is the way I decided to show you on this project. So we're going to do this for all 4 box bottoms, the 2 on the outside and the 2 on the lining. Do you have a preferred way to do box bottoms? Do you like doing the cutouts? Do you prefer to have the point out here and draw a line? Have you tried both? Let me know what you prefer. I'm really curious. Next step, ironing and creating the drawstring channel. So we have our box bottoms. So you can see that it's going to stand up and be super cute. Now we are going to make the channel for the drawstrings. You're going to keep it wrong side out because we're going to be folding it in. We're going to fold down and press about 1/2 inch. So if you want to use a gauge, this basically is a ruler with a little slidey thing. You can set it to 1/2 inch. That's what we're going to do first. So we're going to fold this upper raw edge down 1/2 inch. And you can just kind of do that to get it started and then check it along the way. What I usually like to do is get it pretty much all folded down before I press. All right, so then I'll just move this gauge along and just make sure I don't have it too far down. And then you just want to make sure the back is pretty much the same. Now we're going to fold it down again, and this time we're going to fold it down 1 inch. So I'm just going to move my gauge to 1 inch. I'm eyeballing that. I'm using my gauge to double check. It's looking good. Now we're going to press that. Okay, now we're going to set that aside, and we're going to do the lining. Now we're going to do a small hem on the lining, just not exactly like the front. We're just going to fold it down once, 1/4 inch, and we're going to stitch all the way around that. This is going to be tucked under the drawstring channel, and the reason that we're folding it down and sewing is so that as that drawstring moves around, as the bag is tightened and untightened and enjoyed, that the top isn't going to fray. So you're going to keep this the wrong side out. So you're going to be folding down towards the wrong side. So I've set my gauge to 1/4 inch just to make sure I'm pretty close as I'm ironing. You don't want to go too much. If you were to do a 1/2 inch or more, this is going to stick out of the bottom of that drawstring channel. And I'm just going to run and do a quick stitch all the way around. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how to put the 2 halves together. We are getting close to done. Now we have the channel on the front, pressed twice and folded. We have folded over and sewn the lining 1/4 inch. Now this part is super, super important. You need to make sure there are no colored threads floating around your project, because if they end up floating up here, you're going to see them. Ask me how I know. I put one together the other day and had a big black thread that went up there. So I had to take the seam ripper, open it up and get rid of that thread. So if there's anything colorful and long, just have a little look before you put this together. We're going to keep the front / outside of your bag wrong side out. Now we're going to take the lining. We are going to turn it right side out so that when we put the two together, they are going to be wrong sides together. Now you're going to put the outside into the lining and you're going to line up the side seams, side seam, and the box bottoms. You need to make sure your exterior is really down in there and get the side seams lined up. So make sure those are coming together. And now your lining is going to go just under the edge. See that right there? The edge of your drawstring casing. We're going to have to use pins. I love clips, but we can't use clips in this case because this doesn't come all the way up here. It's just going to be under the edge. So we're going to do both sides, making sure we get that lined up. Now, if you really don't want to line it, you don't have to. You can just put the drawstring in this, but then you're going to have a lot of this stuff going on the inside. So now we have this pinned together. We have those seams lined up on both sides. And now I'm going to kind of go around the top, make sure that lining is underneath. I'm going to put my hands in here and I'm just going to kind of push it around just to make sure everything is lined up. And then if you'll notice at my elbows, make sure, I got to move over more. Okay, so I'm going like this, but where your elbows are, that's really going to help get this top lined up really, really well. So now you look all the way around. The lining is underneath that edge. We're going to put pins all the way around and then we're going to sew. So we're going to sew really close to that edge where it's folded over, making sure we catch the lining. We're going to leave about 1 inch open and we're going to double back so that it's nice and secure because we're just going to string our drawstring through here from the inside of the bag. We are almost done. All that's left is adding the string. So I took a 44-inch piece of nylon paracord, I believe it's called, and it does fray if you don't heat the end. So always be careful. If you're using fire, I just take a little flame stick and you can just see that melt down and it kind of makes it hard, kind of hardens the nylon into little plastic balls. Then I'm just going to take a quilting pin, I'm going to put it through there, and then we are going to thread it into our bag. All right, then you're going to take the pin off when you get it out the other side. I just put the ends together, even them up, and then knot the string. And you can leave that as long as you want, as short. If you want to shorten it, you can shorten it and heat it again. You want to make sure that it can open as wide as it can go before it reaches the knot. That's the main thing. Always have a little bit of extra. So now, look at that. It is ready. Put the gift in there, pull that string, and you have a great Santa gift bag. Is it a quilt? Or is it a pillow? It's both. It's called a Quillow. This is an easy and very beginner-friendly quilting project that is so handy. Kids love it. It's great for a picnic blanket, an emergency blanket, or pillow that folds up and contains itself in your car. So many ways to use this. So let me show you first how it works. I'm using the Crayola Crayon Colors of Kindness fabric from Riley Blake Designs. I chose the crayons for one side and the orange pattern for the other side. Just love it. I did put the pocket on the crayon side, but if I was to do it again, I would put this pocket on the orange side because I feel like the crayon side, if it's for kids, which crayons usually are, is usually going to be the side that they play on and lay on. So unless they really want to like stick their feet in there for some reason, it might be better to have the pocket on the other side, but it still looks great. It blends right in. So it's not a fail. I'm just telling you that because for my next one, I will do it a little bit differently. So let me show you how to fold it, and then I will show you how to make it. Okay, let's get started. So you're going to take the side that has the pocket and you're going to put it down on your floor, workspace, bed, wherever you're going to fold it up. Now, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to fold it about a third of the way in, and it just folds very nicely because it'll catch at the edge of that pocket. Then you're going to take the other side and you're going to fold that in as well. So now we have it folded in thirds, and you can teach kids to do this. I made one of these for my son when he was little, and he loved it, and he was so proud that he could put it all together by himself. Now, the pocket is down here, so we're going to start at the other end, and we're going to fold and fold until we're right up against the tip of that pocket. And then we're going to fold it one more time. So now we have the pocket on this side, the quilt's all folded on this side. Now we're just going to turn it inside out. And this is why it's super important to reinforce these corners, especially if you're going to let kids do this themselves, because those corners are going to have some wear and tear. But I show you how to do that in the video, don't you worry. And the first time you do it, you're going to be like, Tara, I don't think this works. But I promise you it does, and you'll get better at it. So you start to push it in, and then what I like to do is just kind of pull that pocket out, just like you're flipping any kind of sewing project. Get my hand in there and push out those corners so that that space is really open, and we're not trying to open it as we shove the folded up quilt in there. Okay, so my quilt's about here right now, pillow's there, and then you're just going to get the rest of the quilt put in there, and you're just going to arrange it so that it is nice and flat. And now you have a pillow. It's all just going to be straight quilting. You'll need some threads if you want to do your threads to match. And I'm going to show you how and when to change all that as we get into the project. So let's get started. Definitely want to pre-wash your fabric because you're going to be putting them in and out of the wash. So that's really important. Here's what we're going to need to make the quillow. I have cut 2 pieces of fabric. I got 1.5 yards of the orange and 2 yards of the crayons. So this is cut to 41 inches wide by 53 inches long, pretty much as long as I could make it after pre-washing the fabric. Then I did the same size in batting. Now, to talk about batting, it's important as you buy batting to pay attention to how far apart you can do your quilting for your batting. And usually the cheaper the batting, the closer together your lines need to be, because if you don't quilt it enough, the batting will fall apart. So I've seen batting that has to be sewn every 3 to 4 inches, all the way up to 10 inches. So take that into account when you're deciding how you're going to be quilting any quilted project. And also make sure as you're storing scrap pieces that you somehow label your batting so you know what you need to do so that it stays in shape. Then I have done 15-inch squares from the 2 sides that will be the pocket and also the batting. So I'm going to put the quilt part aside for now, and we're going to prepare our pocket. And you're going to prepare the quilt the same way, but at least this I can get onto the camera. So we're going to put the fabrics right sides together, get those evened up, make sure those edges are all lined up. And then we're going to put the batting right on top. So we're making a little sandwich so that when we turn it right side out, the right sides of the fabric will be out and this batting will be sandwiched in the middle. And then you're just going to pin or clip all the way around, and we're going to take it to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew around the square, which will become the pillow pocket with a 1/4-inch seam, leaving space open to turn it, so 4 or 5 inches, and I'm going to double back and forth just to make sure we can get that turned without pulling any stitches. As I quilt the pillow pocket, I'm going to be using a navy blue top thread and a green bobbin so that the lines of the quilting aren't going to be super obvious. You can do colors that match your fabric, or you can do alternate, totally up to you. This is what I've chosen to do on this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew across the very top edge, 1/4 inch from the edge. Now you can see, you can't see that top stitch on the front really or the back because I coordinated that. Next, we're going to be doing some quilting. And you can have fun with it. You can do zigzags, you can do whatever you want, but I am just going to do some quick diagonal lines, and I'm going to use my secret weapon, which is painter's tape. I have it in a few different widths, and I'm going to use 2 inch. And what's beautiful about this is it's not going to leave a residue on your fabric, and you can just keep picking it up and moving it. I want to make sure the diagonal line is diagonal from corner to corner, which it wasn't quite. So I'm going to make the piece as big as the corners, and I'm going to put the tape down so that the corner is right in the middle. So basically at that 1 inch. Now I'm just going to sew on either side of this tape, and then I'm going to move the tape and I will have even 2 inch lines, easy peasy. You can draw lines on there, but I have found this is so quick and easy, and I'm all about that. Let's just get this Quillow done. And if you have one, I recommend a walking foot when you're doing any kind of quilting because it is a little bit thick with the 2 pieces of fabric and the batting in the middle, and that will help it not bunch up because it helps move the bottom and the top fabric at the same time. And I would also use a little bit of a longer stitch. I usually quilt with a 2.9 or 3.0 length stitch. Now I'm just going to line the tape up on the edge of the last stitch mark. Press that down, and now I'm ready to sew exactly 2 inches away from my original stitching. As you get closer to the top, your tape is going to be much, much longer than you need it to be. So you do need to make sure it doesn't stick to your sewing machine as you're beginning to move forward, or it could mess up the evenness of your stitches. So I usually just keep a little bit here, the longer end back here where I can control it a little bit more, and then just keep going. And while 2 inches is right there, I'm not going to sew that because we're already going to be going around that corner, so it is really not needed. I'm going to flip it around and do the other side. Now we have the quilt pocket sewn together and quilted. This is what will be on the outside when it is all folded up, and this is what will be matching the main quilt when it is sewn together. So this is basically the same thing, the same process that we're going to do with the larger quilt. We're going to layer the 3 layers, then we're going to sew them together, flip it right side out, press it. We're going to sew all the way around the outside of the quilt, and then we're going to quilt it. Just make sure you're quilting close enough that your batting is going to do well and not bunch up and fall apart when you put this in and out of the wash. Now I have the quilt section sewn together front to back with the batting in the middle and stitched around the edge. And I'm not going to do the painter's tape guidelines for quilting on this just because it's big and it would be quite a bit of tape to do that. So instead, I'm going to use a ruler and a fabric pen. I'm going to mark it on the orange side because pen is just going to show a lot better than on the navy. So I'm going to take the longest ruler that I have so I can do the longest line at a time without having to move it, 36 inch long and 4 inches wide, and I'm just going to go the width of the ruler. And I've decided that since the angled lines that I did on the pillow pocket wouldn't line up perfectly if I did diagonals on this, and because it's much easier to draw lines when you're going parallel to the edges, that I'm just going to have it go in a different direction so it looks like it was intentional and not like it just didn't quite line up. And I'm using a heat erasable pen, which I love because it shows really, really well. And then once we do our stitching, I'm just going to iron over it and it will disappear like magic. So even when it's darker in some spots and lighter in others, it does not matter at all. Now I just took the easy way and started 4 inches off of an edge, but you'll notice that this isn't going to be 4 inches. So if you really want it to be perfectly symmetrical, you could start with a middle line and then work off the middle line to each side. But I've decided since this is a project, a kid's project, they are never going to notice. And so I'm just going to do what is a little bit easier for me. I'm going to turn it and I'm going to do the same thing going the other direction so that our quilting on this is going to be squares. I'm going to turn this around and start my lines from the top so that if there's a skinnier one, it's going to be at the bottom of the quillo and not at the top. And if your lines start to get a little bit fainter than you'd like, just move slower or go back and forth with your pen. I find if I move too fast, they're very faint. Now I have an orange thread in the top and a navy blue in the bobbin to match the crayon fabric. I'm also going to wear my quilting gloves because they have the silicone grip on there and they will make my hands, it'll make it easier to help move the fabric and keep it straight because it will help grip that fabric and help me with my quilting process. And I am going to start by going the length of the quilt with the center line. So I'm not starting from an end. I'm going to go the length of the quilt in the center, and then I'm going to find about the center, the other direction as well. So I get a big quilted X that will help keep the fabric from shifting too much as I quilt. And the main thing to remember as you move it through is to keep it as flat as possible where you're coming from and as you're going. All right, we got the long way done. Now I'm going to do a center line going in the opposite direction, just to really anchor the fabric because we've sewn all the way around the edges. We've gone down the center lengthwise. Now we're going to go down the center on the width. I like to hold both the bobbin thread and the top thread while I start and as I knot that thread so that one of them doesn't kind of get sucked down and create a big knot. So along the rest of these lines. And if you don't sew perfectly on the line, don't worry about it because again, you're going to iron this at the very end and that line will disappear and no one will know exactly where you drew it. We are in the home stretch. Now we have the quilt all done and quilted in both directions every 4 inches. We have the pillow pocket and we are going to place it with the crayon side up so that when it's open, the crayon side looks like one big piece of fabric. And then when it's folded up, this is going to be on the outside. So the top is the end that we stitched across. You'll notice these sides don't have any stitching yet. We're going to do that next. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find the center of the quilt. So you're just going to fold it in half. Keep your finger on the center. I'm going to put a clip there. So I know where the center is, and then I'm going to get that flat again. Now I'm going to fold this in half also. Find the center, line that center up, and clip it. I went up a teeny bit from the edge. So I didn't line up these edges of the pocket and that because it's going to be a bit thick if we try and do all of that together. So it's better to put it up a little bit. So if you were doing a quilt where you used regular binding, you would put it up from the binding. But for this, I'm just going to put it up about 1/4 inch. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew these 3 sides. And you're really going to want to reinforce up here. This part stays open because when we fold it, it flips and that's where everything goes in. So this needs to be nice and reinforced so that it's not going to rip. I recommend nice long pins if you have them for this because you are going through 4 layers of fabric and 2 layers of batting. And sometimes a little bit more because when we sewed this together and flipped it, remember there's like 4 layers there too. And if your fabric is directional, you want to make sure you're paying attention and that you are pinning this to the bottom of your quilt and not the top. So you'll notice all the crayons are pretty much going in the same direction. I'm not pinning this on the top where then the pillow ones are going to look mostly opposite of what the rest of the quilt looks like. It's really hard to see where this is. So here is the edge. So we're going to start by going back and forth and then creating a little triangle, just really small, to really reinforce this because there's going to be a lot of pressure on this top edge as you fold and unfold and as kids are going to be using this. So because we have no access to the bobbin thread at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to put the needle down and we're going to pull it up and then you're just going to tug and you're going to pull that bobbin thread up through the fabric. See how I did that? So just like you would pull a bobbin thread up if you didn't have anything down, you're just pulling it up through here so that we're still going to be able to hold both the top and the bottom thread when we do a knot. And that is going to reduce the gnarly knots that you sometimes get on the back of a project. I've also switched my bobbin and top thread colors because now the bobbin thread needs to be orange to go with the back and the navy is going to be on top. So let's get this pocket sewn on. So I go down about 1 inch and then I'm going to backstitch all the way to the top again. I'm going to lift my needle and I'm going to twist, and I'm just going to go to like 3 or 4 stitches along the top. I'm going to backstitch again, forward one more time. 1, 2, 3, lift my needle. We're going to pivot, and then we're going to go at an angle back to where we started sewing and then continue down. So that's just really reinforcing that top edge, and we'll do it again when we get to the other top side. If you want to really reinforce it, you can backstitch and forward again on this part. I just remember how hard my son was on these, so I want this thing to stay together and not rip apart. And you'll notice I'm sewing not quite to the edge, so about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the pocket. And now we're to the next top, so we're going to do that reinforcement triangle. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how to make a book pillow. It's basically a pillow with a pocket to hold a book, a wonderful gift for any age. This one is made with my Happy at Home fabric collection from Riley Blake Designs. Let's get started. I am in love with this 16.5-inch square grid ruler from Creative Grids. It's got amazing grip on the back, and it's exactly the size that I want to cut for this 16-inch pillow project. I'm going to be using a 16-inch Polyfill Premier pillow for this project from Fairfield. Since this is going to be a book pillow, and we need to have room for a good book to go into that pocket, I'm going to go 16.5 inches and then sew with a 1/2 inch seam instead of 16-inch with 1/2 inch seam. So what is wonderful about this is I just put this down exactly where I want it, and I'm just going to cut it the exact size. How often does that happen? It's like winning the quilting lottery. So look at that. It's the exact size we need. So we have the 16.5 inch. This is going to be on the front. Then we're going to do the pocket. So I also cut this to 16.5 inches from the panel. I want to have the Love Lives here on the back because this is going to be a reading pillow for a little girl, and I think she's going to love that because love definitely lives in her home. So we're going to use these yellow birds for the pocket and these blue dots for the pocket lining, the handle, and I'm going to do an optional double fold bias tape trim on the pocket just to give it a little extra. We're going to use that. I'm going to cut 10 inches by 16.5 inches from this yellow, but it is important because this is directional fabric to make sure you pay attention and that you do 16.5 inches wide. Now we're going to get this 10 inches. Oh, I've set myself up to practice being left-handed again. My mom and dad were both left-handed, so I'm sure my dad is looking down on me, very happy that I am embracing left-handedness. You guys right-handed or left-handed? I would love to know in the comments how many lefties we have out there. So that's going to be the front of the pocket. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the blue. Now the blue dots we're using for 3 different things. So we have to do 3 cuts with this. The first is going to be the 16.5 by 10 because it's going to be the lining for the pocket. Because this is a dot, it doesn't matter which direction you lay anything out, which is what makes it perfect to use for the bias tape. We're going to do straight edge bias tape and also for the fabric handle. So for the fabric handle, we need 4 by 8. And for the optional pocket bias tape, we need 2 inches by 16.5. I'm going to put the fusible fleece on the pocket lining fabric, just so if it ever gets a little bit rumpled or whatever, it's going to be on the inside of the pocket, and the fabric on the outside of the pocket is going to be super cute and good. It shouldn't be a huge problem, but you have the option of which side to use. So I'm going to take that option. And I like to use Pellon 987F fusible fleece. I just always keep a ton of it in my sewing room because I use it for zipper bags and lots of different fusible projects. Now, it says on the directions, you always want to follow the directions for whatever fusible fleece you use, that for a strong bond, you want to put a fabric on top. So you're putting the fused side up on the wrong side of this fabric. And then I'm going to put a pressing cloth down And I'm going to spray it with water. They said to have it damp, so I'm going to get it quite wet or damp. And then you're going to put your iron on a wool setting, and then you're just going to press down and hold that, and that's going to give it a really strong bond with the fleece. And you're going to do the same thing, putting the 16 by 16 fusible fleece on the front pillow fabric. Okay, so we're going to set that aside. While we have the ironing board out, we're going to do our other ironing chores. So the next thing we need to iron is for our little handle. And this is 4 inches wide by 8 inches long. First, we're going to press it in half. So then you're going to open it up and you're going to press the raw edges right into that crease. Now, because this is a pretty short piece, I'm just going to finger press that, both sides in. If it was longer, I would be using the iron on both of these sides. But again, because it's short, we can do that. And then you're going to fold it in half. And now I just have to press that one more time. If you want to get nice, crisp folds, you can use a quilter's clapper or a tailor's clapper, which is just longer. And when you take the iron off, you're going to press down with this piece of wood, and it's grooved, so it's really easy to hold. And it absorbs some of the heat, and it gives you a nice, crisp fold. This is great for when you're pressing open little seams, especially on small quilt blocks, and also for projects like that. So then we're just going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch down that edge to get that closed. And then this is going to become the handle for our pillow, and it won't buckle like that once we sew it. Okay, one more thing to press. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing on this long piece. And because this one is a bit longer, I am going to press down each side, making sure that I don't press that center crease that we just made. And then we're going to fold it in half. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our pocket and we're going to put the right sides together. And you're going to pin or clip, and we are going to sew this top edge with a 1/2 inch seam. Now I have my pillow front fused to the fleece and my pillow pocket with the inside and the outside good to go. We just sewed that and then I pressed that. And you can keep it simple like this, and this is what it would look like. You just stitch across here, but I have decided that I do want to add a little bit of trim. You're going to place the double fold bias tape down, and then you're going to put this sewn and pressed edge right in that crease, and you're going to line up the sides. Sometimes I make the bias tape a little bit longer so that I don't have to be so precise lining it up. And then I just trim it at this point. But because we already had that fabric that was cut exactly 16.5 inches for the inside of the pocket lining, it was just really easy to make it the same size. Whenever you're doing a bias tape, always turn it over when you get down a little bit and just double check that you're getting the other side. Because the worst thing is when you get all the way done and you realize you haven't caught both sides of that bias tape. I'm going to prepare to tack the handle onto the pillow front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this in half and find the center. And I'm just going to put a pin in there so I know where that center is. We're just going to put this evenly from the center of the pillow. So the further apart you put it, the smaller the handle is. The closer together you put it, it's going to be a skinny handle, but it will come up more. So you can just decide based on the size of the person's hands that you are giving this to. And I'm going to put it 1 inch on either side of center. Pin that, and then we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew back and forth across both of these with 1/4 inch from the edge, because when we sew the whole pillow together, we are going to be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so you won't even see that. But we want to make sure this gets tacked on and stays in place and is nice and sturdy. And I have pinned the pocket onto the pillow front. So we're just basting this to make sure the pocket and the front stay in place when we sew everything together. So I'm going to do it really close to the edge, about 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to do a longer stitch length. Because again, this is just keeping it in place for the real sewing that we're going to do shortly. Because I wanted to use this block for the back of the pillow, I'm not doing an envelope pillow, which a lot of people do. And that basically means on the back of the pillow, you would have 2 pieces of fabric that overlap. So you just shove the pillow in there, but you would be able to take the cover off if you needed to wash it or something like that. We are forgoing that because I just really, really want this on the back. So we are going to leave a big space in the bottom open when we sew it. We're going to put the pillow in and we're going to sew that closed by hand. The next thing we need to do is we're going to just flatten that handle because we want this to be as flat as possible. And we're going to put the back, so we're doing right sides together, lining up all the edges, and we're going to pin all the way around. Now I'm also going to do a clip on each side where the pocket overlaps because I want to make sure that I double stitch over those two sections to reinforce them, since it will be opened and closed to add a book in that area. So I want to make sure that that is going to be nice and secure. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to put a clip. Just my clips are often to remind me, ooh, this is an important spot to pay attention to if I'm not clipping all the way around. So I'm going to do a clip here to let me know where to stop for my opening. And I'm going to do this gold one for where I'm going to start. So I'm going to keep this much open for turning and inserting the pillow form. Okay, I think we have that pinned pretty well. Now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew all the way around, leaving this much open using a 1/2 inch seam. So I decided to go with the Premier Pillow Form from Fairfield, the 16 inch, because it's a little bit more solid. The basic ones were super fluffy, and I thought for a pillow that you're going to put a book in and maybe put on your lap to hold the book, you want something a little bit more firm. So that's why I decided to go with this one. Now we are going to turn the pillow right side out. Put my fingers in there, push out the corners. Now, if you want your corners pushed out a little bit more, which isn't as important on a pillow because it's not going to be like, like a quilt where it's totally flat, you can use a turning tool. And once you do it as much as you can with your fingers, you're just going to gently press that. Don't be too forceful, because if you are, you may see it come right through your corner, and then you're going to have to go fix that seam. All right, so that's going to be the back. That's going to be the front. Now we have to get this big pillow into this hole. I just fold it in half, put it in, and that doesn't look good, does it? That's because it's not flattened in there. So now you just need to manipulate the pillow so that the pillow corners go into the corners that you sewed and get it nice and flat. This is also why I make the case a tiny bit bigger than many people do, because I feel like it's still a really good fit. And it looks good, and I don't feel like I'm going to be straining those seams too much. So that's the front. The book's going to go in there. That's the back. Now the only issue we have is right here. We need to get this sewn together. So we basically are folding that fabric so that we know where we want to do our ladder stitch, also called a blind stitch or an invisible stitch, to sew that pillow right into there without being able to see the stitching. We could put it on the sewing machine, but then it would have a little bit of a bubble. And I feel like for this kind of a project that's going to be on someone's lap, often with this side facing them, it is worth the effort to do a little bit of hand sewing. So now I'm going to get my thread and I'm going to show you how to do this ladder stitch, and then we will be done. Now I have taken a piece of white thread and doubled it and put a knot at the end. You don't want to make it so long that it ends up getting tangled. This is pretty long. We're going to hope that it works. Sometimes it's better to use 2 pieces if you have a really long section than have it get too tangled and knotted, but we'll see how it goes. I always start, I'm right-handed. We've talked about this a couple of times so far. I always start on the left because I find it an easier angle. What we're going to do is we're going to take our needle and we're going to go underneath that folded over part. And we're going to go slightly beyond where the stitching ends. And we're going to come up right in that brown part. So my needle is basically in the folded section, coming up at the fold. And I'm going to pull that, and I'm going to make sure that that knot is going to hold. If your knot is too small, it will come through. So give it a little bit of a tug and make sure that's going to hold. Now I turn it around, because now we want to go this way and close the opening. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go straight across. So it's come out here. You're going to go straight across, put your needle in basically in the fold of the yellow side, go down 1/8 to 1/4 inch and have it come out. And you want to be pinching it together as you go, just so you get a nice tight thing. Now you're going to do it the opposite way. You're going to come straight across and you're going to go into the fold of the brown, about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch. And you're just going to keep doing that. You're going to go straight across and down. And that is why it's often called a ladder stitch. Because if you think about it, you're basically building a ladder with an invisible rung because you're pulling it tight. But you're going straight up those seams, and you're just going to keep doing that until it's closed. And then you just really don't see it. So if we pull this apart, you can see how you're getting straight stitches that go across. But when you're pulling it tight, they disappear, and you're going to have a beautiful finished look for this pillow. You're just going to keep going until you get to the end. Okay, I stitched all the way across. Look how good that looks. You can't see it. So now the way to finish it is you're going to go across one last time, but you're not really going to catch very much. You're not going to go at the 1/8 to 1/4 inch, just a little bit. You're going to put your thumb in there so that the loop doesn't pull all the way through. Then you're going to double back and put your needle through that loop and tie that knot. You can do a second one if you want to, but there's not really going to be any strain on this. So I usually just do one if it feels like it's right down there. And then I just shove my needle in and kind of press my pillow together and angle it out like that. Just pull that thread through. Then I tug on it a little bit, push down, and then I just trim it. And now the tail of the thread is going to be inside the pillow. So now you're just going to mush it again a little bit. Get that pillow form nice and formed, and there is the back, and there is the front with a pocket for a book. So that's all we need. With this size, you could put any kind of a book. You could put a coloring book in there and some pencils. You could put a book that you're reading. You could put 2 of those things in there. Lots of possibilities and a cute little handle to carry it around. In today's tutorial, it's all about kids and it's all about the coloring. Or if you like to color, you go for it. Make one of these for yourself. There should be no age limit on these. I apologize. With 1/4 yard of fabric, you can make 2 of these holders that holds a 3x5 little notepad that you can find pretty much anywhere and 6 crayons. Or you can make a really long one that holds 16 crayons and the notepad if you use the entire 1/4 yard for one project. So I'm going to walk you through how to do these little ones. And then if you want to make it bigger, you're just going to double it up and have a lot of fun. Let's get started with our materials. This is a pretty simple project, so you don't need very much. Once we have this all sewn together, you're going to need a memo book. I use these 3x5 inches and then some crayons, but we can set those aside for now. You're going to need fabric, rotary cutter, pins or clips, 2-inch piece of hook and loop, also known as Velcro, a piece of fabric that is 5.5 by 1.5 to make our closure tab, and then my favorite, heat erasable pen for marking those lines. You can also use a chalk marker or a pencil, totally your choice, but I like how easy these are to see when you draw on the fabric. And that is going to come off with heat. So once you hit the iron to that, it is completely gone. No one will ever know it was there. And then also I like to use a little square ruler. You can use any kind of ruler that you have, but I like to use this one to do my markings. It's a great size and I will show you that in a little bit. Now this is a 1/4 yard of fabric. I cut it the full width of fabric, then I cut the selvage off one end and I cut it in half. This way we can make 2 of these little crayon carriers out of 1/4 yard of fabric, making it a really economical thing to use if you're making multiple. Because this is a tutorial for the easiest way to do this, you definitely want to use a solid, just a random print like dots or things like stripes, things like that, or something that's not going to look super directional. And here is why. This would be so cute for a little crayon thing, right? When you sew it together, this is going to be the outside, and then we're going to fold this up to put all the crayons and everything, and the inside is going to be completely upside down. This is possible, but that's going to be a whole nother thing. And the first step is to just take this fabric and fold it the long way, right sides together, and then you can either clip or pin these 2 sides, and then we're going to do the same thing with this little closure. So we're just going to fold that in half, and we're going to sew down these 2 sides And this one, I'm just going to finger press, which basically means push it with your fingers. And I'm just going to put one pin in that. Now we're going to go sew these together. I'm just going to sew down each side with a 1/4 inch seam. The next step is to turn both of these right side out. Now, I want to cut off a teeny bit of the fabric right there, but make sure you do not cut your stitching. So it's kind of like cutting a corner, but you're only cutting one part because we did a fold instead of stitching that other side. And this one, because it's big, really easy to turn right side out. We're going to grab the ironing board in a minute. This one, because it's so skinny, this is 1 inch in between the stitching. It is a bit harder to turn right side out, but I'm going to show you my tip. So the first thing is you want to turn it so that the seam is folded down, right? You don't want to put too much strain on that seam. And then you can just see what you can do with your fingers. But I also like to grab tweezers. And so I will put the tweezers as far in there as I can. I got it. See how it's pinched in there? Now I'm going to keep that pinched and I'm just going to pull that out like that. Okay, now we have to get the corners out. So I'm going to use this handy dandy tool, turning tool in a cute little Riley Blake bird. And the key is just to kind of run it along the seam and be really gentle at those corners because you don't want to push through the fabric. Now, if you don't have something like this, you can use other tools. So you could use a pen as long as you don't have it open because you don't want to be drawing on the inside of your fabric. If you're really careful, you can also use this pointy tip from the cleaning brush that came with your sewing machine. But you have to be really, really gentle because it's quite pointy and it's going to be pretty easy to poke through that fabric, but that does work. You can also use a chopstick, basically anything with a little bit of a point can be used to push it out, but you just want to be gentle. But look at what great points we have on that. Next step involves a little bit of ironing. You're going to push these seams out. We want to have it nice and flat and the seams to be on the edge. And then this is just a fold, but we do want to press that. So everything is nice and flat. The next step, we're going to press this raw edge under about 3/8 of an inch. It doesn't have to be exact. This is one of those beautiful projects. If you do a 1/2 inch, you're going to be totally fine. So once we get that finger pressed, we're just going to take the iron and press that closed. Now we're going to press this one as well. We don't have to fold this end under because it is going to get tucked in here. So yay for that. We just have to make sure it's nice and flat and even. So while we have the iron on, we're going to press this up, which is going to be the start of making our pockets. And we are going to fold it up 2 3/4 inches. So what I'm going to do, and don't iron on your quilting rulers, but it's great to do this. I'm going to put my ruler up here, and then I'm just going to fold this up and see what happens. Well, that's too far. So I'm going to line this edge up with 2 3/4, and then I'm just going to push the ruler until I can feel that the ruler is at this fold. Take my ruler out, and as long as these sides are straight, you're going to have a nice consistent 2 3/4 inches all the way across. So I'm just going to press this in place. Now we're going to take our hook and loop. So we have the scratchy side, which is the hook, and the soft side, which is the loop. And they, as you know, stick together very nicely, and kids can do it. So the soft side is going to go on the back of the crayon container, and the scratchy / hook side is going to go on our tab. And the reason for that, let me show you the one that's done, is that if someone has this laying on their lap, you don't want the scratchy part of the Velcro on their lap, because if they're wearing something knit, that could attach and mess up their clothes. So really important to put the soft side on the back and the scratchy side over here, because that's always going to be face up when they are using this pack. It's the little things, right?
So I'm just going to head over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew this onto the tab. And then I will be right back and show you how to figure out exactly where that goes on the back of this fabric. You want to use a pretty small stitch length. I'm going to be using a 1.8 because this is a small piece and we're just going to be going around it in a box. You also want to make sure you pull up your bobbin thread because the front of the closure tab is where the bobbin thread is going to be. So if you skip this step and end up with one of those little bird nests at the beginning of your stitching, it is going to show. So let me remind you how to do that. You're going to put it pretty close to the folded edge because this raw edge is going to go inside the crayon pack. So I'm just going to put a clip right here just to keep it in place. Okay, if you haven't seen this before, let's do it. So you're going to hold your top thread. You're going to put your presser foot down. You're going to lower your needle, still holding this thread, lift your needle, give it a little tug, and grab that bobbin thread. This is going to stop it from getting sucked under when you get started. So then you're going to put both of these threads under the foot and you're going to hold them tight while you start. So do like 2 to 3 stitches, keep holding them, and then do 2 to 3 backwards. So that locks those in place. Now these should not get sucked under anymore, so you can let that go. And now we are just going to sew all the way around this loop to attach it to the closure. And you can see we didn't have a big old bird's nest back there. Just need to cut that off. Now, if you didn't want this to show, you could just match your bobbin thread to the main color of your fabric. I'm going to show you how to get the soft side on the back of the crayon pad. The next step is to decide where our closure goes and then make sure that the loop gets lined up properly on the back of the case. But before we do that, I want to show you one other thing that I forgot to mention when I just folded that up and ironed it. This is the open end and this is folded. So the closure is going to go here because it gets tucked in. That means that this notepad is going to go on the left. And that is because it's going to roll up nicely and close when the notepad is on the opposite side of the closure. This is the one that I did that way. So you just flip, flip, perfect, right? This was the second one I did. This was the first one I did when I hadn't thought through that part, and I put the closure on the same side as the notepad. Well, if you flip, that doesn't work. So you end up having to like do this really weird flip. Yeah, it's just not good. So the closure is always the opposite side of the notepad. Now, being a right-handed daughter of 2 left-handed parents, I want to tell you how to do it the opposite way. If you want this to be on the right, all you do is you put your opening on the left and you would fold it up in that direction. That way your closure's over here, your notepad's over here. So now you know how to do it both directions. We're gonna stick with what I already did. Find the center and you can either measure with a ruler or you can just use your grid if you have it on your mat. So I'm going to fold this back and I'm just going to place this in here 2 1/4 inches. So we have like 2 1/4 on either side. Have it in about 1/2 inch and I'm going to pin that in place. And I'm going to do it from both sides just so that it stays straight. Now we're going to turn it over. So this is the back and you're going to measure 2 3/4 inches from this side. So I'm just going to put this ruler down and you can draw a mark or you can just leave your ruler sitting on there. And that is what you're going to use to line up the edge of the loop. Now I'm going to keep that there. And just to make sure I have it lined up well, I'm going to fold this back, making sure this edge and this edge are lined up. And I'm going to very quickly realize, nope, it's too far up. So I'm just going to scooch it down so that that is all lined up so that it's going to hit very nicely when you go to close. Hold that down, fold that back, pick this up because the folded part is under there, or we could have just moved that back, but it's easier to see that way. Now I'm going to put a pin in here so I know exactly where I want this to be. And I do kind of put it to one side so I can start sewing here. And now I'm just going to go sew that on just like we sewed the other half on. We have our closure pinned. We have our loop on the back. So we're going to keep it where the hook is facing up. We're going to fold this back up. And the next step is to sew all the way down from here down to here. We're going to go across the bottom and up to here. You know what's no fun? When you forget to hit record. I forgot to hit record as I was sewing that, but thankfully it was something simple. So I think you can get it. So I started up here and then I doubled back here and I sewed all the way around. And then I went over the edge and back just to reinforce that edge. So now we can remove this pin. And some people ask, why do I sew on the bottom since it is a fold? Partly just to finish it and give it a little bit more stability, because I don't see the need to put any kind of interfacing in here because the notepad and the crayons keep it pretty solid, but this does help with that a little bit. And it also helps the crayons just kind of stay up a little bit because you need this fold to be big enough to keep your notepad in place, but not so big that you can't see the crayons. So it can be a little bit of a quandary. Now it is time to do our markings. That means you need to make a decision. Do you want your notepad to be stored like this, where the whole notepad is in the pocket? Or do you want just this back cardboard to be in the pocket and the rest to be out so that it's just easy for the kids or whoever to flip through that? Totally personal preference. If you want it this way, you're going to have the cardboard in here, and then you're just going to take your ruler, go maybe 1/8 of an inch past the cardboard, and then you're going to just draw a line down the pocket so you know where to sew to make this pocket for the notepad. If you had made a different choice, you can see this stitch line wouldn't work. If you wanted it to be totally tucked in, you're going to want to sew 3.5 for a snug fit or 3 3/4 for an easier fit from the seam, not the edge, because if you go from the edge, it might be a little bit too tight to get your notepad in. So this is our first stitch line that we're going to do. Now we are going to make little pockets for the crayons, just like this. And for that, I want you to start from this edge because sometimes there's not quite enough space in between the notepad to put an extra crayon, and you want to make sure if you have any extra weird amount of space, you want it near the notepad, not over here. I just turn it over, and again, you're going to start your marking from the seam line, not from the edge. And you're going to mark 1 inch. This is what 1 inch looks like. It's nice and roomy. If you want to get more crayons in there and you want it to be a little bit more of a snug fit, you could do like 3/4 of an inch, but I like to do 1 inch myself. And then you're just going to draw 1 inch increments off of the previously drawn line and see how easy it is to see these lines because they're made with this pen. Okay, so see, we have a weird amount. No crayons fitting in there, but we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over here. So this is why you measure from this side for your notepad and this side for your crayons. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine. I'm going to remember to hit record, and I'm going to show you how we are going to finish putting these stitch lines, and then all that will be left is adding our notepad and our crayons. I put 2 pins just to make sure this stays nice and flat as I'm sewing these lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew in U shapes just to save time. If you want to, you can start and stop on each individual line, but I'm going to start up here, go down. I'm going to go right along that same stitch line and then go back up. So then I'm only starting and stopping a few times. And each time you start, you definitely want to pull up that bobbin thread because your bobbin is going to be on the outside of this project. And you're going to want to go beyond the fold, just like 2 stitches, just again, to reinforce it when people are putting crayons in and out. Now you'll notice I'm about to sew up onto the loop a little bit, which is totally fine, but that's why we put that loop on before we sewed these channels. Now we need to get these lines off of the fabric. And all you need to do is heat up your iron. Look at that. I'm like a child. This amuses me every time. See, all that is left is to add our notebook and our crayons. So we had decided to have it go like that, and that's perfect size. Then you just roll it up and attach that Velcro, and it is ready to go. Let me know in the comments below how you would use these. I'm very, very curious. And if you make and post any of these online, be sure to tag me at Artist Tara Reed. Hey, it's Tara Reed. Welcome to my studio. Today we are going to talk about pillowcases. I had a little quandary come into my inbox through Facebook, and the woman wanted to know if I could figure out or if I knew how to do a pillowcase where every fabric was directional. I have to admit, I had not done that before. Now, I have done them like this, where I have had one directional print and then just one that didn't matter, right? So the cuff is just a polka dot or whatever. This is your easiest way to go. A cuff and a print, 2 pieces, pillowcase. A little bit harder when you throw a directional print in there, but I've done that before. But I had never done it where all 3 pieces, the mane, the accent, and the cuff, were all directional. Figured out the secret sauce. I've also figured out how to purposely put the cuff on the right or the left of the pillowcase. And I'll admit that in the past, I thought I was doing it correctly and ended up with it on the other side and decided I didn't care. But if you're doing if you're doing 2 for a bed, you want one on the left and one on the right like that, right? All right, so who is excited to get into this? When you're making a pillowcase, if you're using directional fabric, when you're looking at it, say from the bottom of the bed, you want the pattern, the print, to look at you. You don't want it to go sideways, like you don't want your birds this way or this way. And I have bought kits before where the store selling the kit was like, oh no, that's the way it goes. But my feeling is if nobody ever sells me a pillowcase where something's going sideways, I don't want to make a pillowcase where something's going sideways. This is the direction the print should go. The cuff needs to go that direction as well. And then I used a stripe and I wanted the stripes going this way. I didn't want brown and like one color up this way. So I had a lot of things to pay attention to when putting this together. Now, as I said before, doing one thing directional and 2 things non-directional, either solid or a random toss, is going to be a little bit easier, a little less thought, a little less fabric involved. But I'm going to show you the hardest way, and then you decide which way that you want to go. Ready to get started? All right, I'm going to do my very best to have you see everything that's going on, but these pieces of fabric are kind of big. I'm working in a smaller office. I don't have a huge studio, so bear with me. We're still going to get this done. So the first thing you need is your 3 pieces of fabric, assuming you're going to be using the main fabric, the cuff, and the optional accent piece. Now remember, the accent piece, there's kind of this pretty extra decorative piece here. You can skip it if you want to, but we are going to do it. We're going all out. The most important thing is as you lay it out each time is make sure your direction is always the same. Make sure the top of your main print is at the same place as the top of your cuff print. So these are all folded in half. Your main print is 40 inches this way with the top of the direction to the bottom, 40 inches. So it's really tall. It feels a little weird, but that's because the pillow goes in the middle. And it is 27 inches wide. My accent piece is again 40 inches high by 2 inches wide. And I cut my cuff, again, 40 inches high by 9 inches wide. So those are our 3 pieces of fabric. Now, because you're using directional fabric, you need 1 1/8 yards to get that 40-inch with a direction. Here's the quandary in my mind. So say you're only making 1 pillowcase, you're going to need 1 yard and 1/8 of this cuff fabric, but you're only going to use 9 inches of it. So you're going to have a ton left over. So hopefully you're going to have another project that you want to make out of that. Or you can make 2 pillowcases that are the alternates. And that's what we're going to end up with. Because from that 1 1/8 yards, you can cut both the main piece and a cuff piece and still have a little bit left over. Or you can check your scraps. If you have something that's really long and directional, 9 inches or wider, you can use it for the cuff, no problem. Just throwing a couple a couple things out there. But again, cuff, 40 by 9, accent, 40 by 2, main, 40 by 27. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to take our accent fabric and our cuff fabric, and we are going to press it in half lengthwise, so matching these long ends, wrong sides together. So as you're pressing, you want to see the pretty side of your fabric. We're just going to press all that 40-inch length. So we're matching those raw edges. I'm going to do the same with the cuff. We're going to match the raw edges on the 40-inch sides, and we are going to press that in half. Once you get a hang of making pillowcases, they can come together so quickly and easily. When my son was little, he loved having different themed pillowcases. I would make him Christmas ones, Halloween, lots of fun. They make great gifts. They're also great. Sometimes people will do them for donations. Sometimes this pillowcase makes someone feel special. So let me know in the comments how and when you're going to be using pillowcases if you give this a try. I'd love to know. And now is the time we decide which side we want our cuff on. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to open your cuff fabric that we just pressed in half and place it on your workspace face up. Now, the rule of thumb is pin to the opposite side you want your cuff on. So since I already made one with the cuff on the left, I pinned everything to the right. So now, and I mean to the right when we're looking at the print. So the top of the print's this way. So this is the right-hand side of this fabric. So this time I want to make a cuff on the right-hand side. So we're going to pin everything to the left. So I'm going to take this accent strip where I have my raw edges, and I'm going to place the raw edges of the accent strip right along the left-hand side raw edge of my cuff. Okay, so just remember, if you want your cuff on the right, you pin to the left. If you want your cuff on the left, you pin to the right. That is the secret. You know what, I need to turn this around so that I'm clipping it towards myself because I can't make sure that these raw edges are lined up perfectly when I have it on the opposite side of me. Now, we're going to take our main print and we're going to put it upside down. But we first want to make sure the top of this print is at the same place as the top of this print. If you have it this way, one's going to be upside down. Okay, so this is really important. This is where you really got to pay attention to the direction. And then we're going to bring this edge when it's upside down and match that up with these raw edges. So we're making a sandwich. Cuff, accent piece, both raw edges. That one stays folded. Cuff is open, accent stays folded, and then the main print. So we need to get that top lined up with the edge of the cuff and also these edges over here, and then I'm going to clip them together. Now you can clip or pin, totally up to you, either way you want to go. Like I said, unless it's really precise, I'm usually a big fan of clips. They never poke me, never draw blood. Okay, so we have this really big piece, which is the main piece, our cuff, and our trim. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the burrito. So we're going to roll this fabric. We're going to fold this up towards the raw edge, but leave a little bit of space and just keep folding it. So it's like that. So we can see the whole cuff. We can see this. We can double check again that our direction is correct before we go further. Then we're just going to fold this cuff raw edge over to here. And we're going to add it to the clip sandwich. So we want to make sure we have plenty of room because we don't want to catch our main fabric when we sew this together. We're just sewing the cuff, one side of the main fabric, and the trim together. Then we're going to pull it out. All these raw edges are going to be encapsulated inside that cuff like magic. So we're just going to pull this over and add it to all of our clips, making sure all of these raw edges are lined up. Okay, so you can see that's the main thing all rolled in there. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we are going to sew down all these raw edges with a 1/4 inch seam. Now that we have this long tube sewn together, we are simply going to pull the main fabric outside of the cuff, and we're going to flip that cuff. So the green is the cuff. I just flip that a little bit, and then I'm just going to pull that out. So now what we have is this. You can't see the whole thing, so it's 40 inches still this way. We have the main fabric. We have the cuff on the right-hand side. We have the accent trim, and everything is going in the right direction. So we're happy dancing so far. Next, we're going to take the iron, and we're going to iron this cuff out. We're going to iron this all flat. We're going to make sure the cuff is just going out really nicely. And then it's up to you if you want to do some decorative stitching here or if you just want to leave it. You could do a decorative stitch right along the edge of the cuff and leave this trim up. Or usually if I'm making them for kids, I'll do a decorative stitch here too, because I find when it goes through the laundry and they're, sleeping on that kind of hard, this ends up all wrinkled and it bugs me. And I honestly do not feel like ironing kids' pillowcases. So I usually do a decorative stitch here and a decorative stitch here, so it looks good and it all stays in place. Ironing next, and then we're getting close to done. I mean, this is simple. Then you're either going to serge it together, or I'm going to show you how to put this together with a French seam if you do not have a serger. Now, the next step is to sew these two sides together. So the bottom and this one end. And how you do that is going to depend on what kind of sewing machine you have. If you have a serger, you're going to put this together, right sides together, and then you're just going to serge here and here, turn it right side out, and you're done. I do not currently have a serger, so I'm going to show you how to do a French seam. A French seam is basically where we're going to sew that area twice, and we're going to encapsulate the raw edges on the inside. So you're going to put this together, wrong sides together, so that the pretty side is up. You want to really make sure you're matching your accent piece and your cuff, because that's the part that people are going to notice the most. So you're going to match that up, flatten that all out, get it nice and straight. I like to line it up along my grid lines. And then this is not as straight as I would like it. So I'm just going to trim a teeny bit off of this edge. And then I'm going to trim a little bit off this edge so that it is perfectly even for sewing. And this pillowcase is a little bit oversized, so don't worry about this step. It is not going to affect the ability of this thing to go onto a standard pillow. Now, because this is two pieces of fabric and I really want to make sure it stays together perfectly, I'm going to be using pins. You can use clips, but they might slip a teeny bit, so I'm a pinner on this step. What do you prefer? Are you always a pinner? Do you pin and clipper? Let me know in the comments. Okay, so we have this pin together. This is all even. We are going to sew this side and this side with a 1/4 inch seam. Now I turned the pillowcase wrong side out, and then I pressed really nicely along the two seams that we just did. So you want to make sure you have it nice and tight and nice and flat, because what we're going to do is we're now going to come back along and we're going to sew 3/8 of an inch from that edge so that the last 1/4 inch seam is encapsulated in there, never to be seen again. And while my machine has guides for a 3/8 inch seam, I'm going to use this little magnetic seam guide just to give me a little extra. See, it really yanks on there, really attaches on there. So I'm just going to line it up with the 3/8 inch mark, and it's going to go straight. Okay. It's gonna be a lot easier to just make sure I have that consistent when I'm just rubbing up against that. So it's just an easy little tool that I like to use that you might not know about. And you can find a link below the video if you're on my YouTube channel or my blog to find that if you want to grab one from Amazon. And now the moment of truth. We have done a French seam along these two edges. Now all we need to do is turn it right side out. Push those corners out. Every once in a while, you might have a little string. Don't even worry about it. Just grab it, snip it, and don't tell anybody about it. Nobody needs to know. And there we go. We just made a pillowcase with 3 directional fabrics and the cuff on the right-hand side. And it will be a perfect companion to this one, which has the cuff on the left and uses the opposite fabrics. How cute would that be on a little girl's bed? And I know exactly who I'm going to be sending it to. So if you make one of these, I would love to see, if you post it on social media, be sure to tag me. I would love to see what fabrics you use, how it came out. You can also find a printed PDF version with lots of pictures and written instructions in my Etsy shop. There will be a link below the video for that as well. Wishing you and yours sweet dreams on your handmade pillowcases.
In today's episode, we're going to be making something for baby, one of my favorite projects, which is a big, soft, snuggly hooded towel. And we're just going to go the simple way so we can whip these out. Makes a great baby shower gift, something great to make for your own baby, and they are just wonderful. If you go to the store, I went to Target, grab 2 bath towels, 1 hand towel, and some scraps of fabric that you like, or if you want it to be even faster, a 2 or 3 inch wide ribbon. You can make 2 of these hooded towels in no time flat. We're going to set our bath towel aside for now, and we are going to work with our hand towel. So we're going to lay this open, and we're going to measure how wide it is. So this one is 17 inches. The reason we need to know that is we're going to be preparing our fabric. So I'm using this scrap of the Crayola Colors of Kindness by Riley Blake Designs. And since our hand towel is 17 inches wide, we need a piece of fabric that is 19 inches by 4 inches. Then we're going to be pressing it and turning it into a 2-inch wide piece that will go across the hood and be super cute. So I'm going to start by cutting a 4-inch wide strip. And then 19, since this is folded in half, we need 19 divided by 2, which is going to be 9.5. I'm going to open that up and double check my work. Okay, 19. Now I'm going to grab an iron and the ironing board. Okay, we have our 19-inch piece of fabric. I'm going to turn that right side down, and I'm going to give it a little mist because I am using an iron without steam. Are you a steamer, or do you prefer to put your water right onto your fabric? Let me know in the comments. So the first thing I'm doing is I am pressing this in half, and then we're going to open it back up, and we're going to press each side into the center, and that is going to give us a beautiful 2-inch strip of this Crayola fabric with the raw edges put on the inside. I like to use regular size towels so the kids can grow into them. They can just be super big and fluffy for babies, but then they can even use them as they become toddlers. And we're going to go back to our hand towel. Now, the reason we can do 2 hooded towels from each hand towel is that these hand towels are nice and long. So what we're going to do is we are going to line up one of the sewn edges, and then you're going to cut 10 inches from that side. So you're going to have a hood that has 3 edges that are already sewn, and then the 1 raw edge, which is the one that we're going to attach to the towel. So you don't have to deal with bias tape and all the things like that with this project. We're all about just getting this done fast, cute, and ready to use. So I'm doing the same thing, just cutting that at 10 inches. And then we have just a little bit of extra. So I'm going to save this. I might sew it with some flannel to the other side and make a cute little washcloths. We'll just set that aside for now. And we will also set aside the second top. You do want to make sure you don't let a lot of fuzz stay on your cutting mat, because if it stays in those grooves, your mat won't last as long. All right, we're going to get the ironing board back up here, and you want to pin this onto the right side of your towel. So this should be the inside of the hood. See where it's folded over, and this is going to be the outside. So you'll notice we made it a little bit longer, and the reason I have it back on here is because we are going to press these ends so that they are the perfect length for this hand towel. And even each end might be a little bit different. So you just always want to do it. And you can decide where you want to put it, closer to the edge, further up. That's totally personal decision. So you'll see I just folded that over. I'm going to give that a little press. And then I'm just going to pin those ends. You want to make sure you don't pin it to your ironing board. Then we're just going to make sure it's going straight across your towel. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. We're just going to fold that under so that it matches the edge of our towel. Then you're just going to put a few pins to hold it in place and make sure it's going to stay straight. Then we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch around all 4 sides to secure this to the hood of the towel. Now I have my fabric on there, and so now I'm going to fold this in half with the fabric side in. And we're going to match these raw edges, and you can clip or pin them together. And then we are going to sew the raw edge together. Now there's a couple ways you can do this. You can do a 1/2 inch and a 1/4 inch seam, or you can do a zigzag. We basically want to get this sewn together and also try and encase some of this edge because it is, a towel. And so it is going to kind of fray apart if we don't somehow overlock that. So I'm going to do a zigzag stitch a little more than a 1/4 inch. So let's see how this goes. I do have a walking foot on here, but it doesn't work for zigzag, I'm learning. So if you want to zigzag with two terry cloth, it almost is sitting still. So I'm just kind of pulling and helping the bottom feed dogs by pulling on the top. This might be one reason to do 2 straight lines, but I really do like how this is encapsulating it. So you can see up here is where it just kind of sat still. And so those stitches are really close together, but here you can't see them as well because I was helping to move that fabric through. And it did go over the edges, so it's not going to fray a lot when it's washed. So now we have our hood, and we are ready to go back and pin it to the towel, and we are almost done. Now that our hood is done, we have to connect it to our towel. And we're going to fold the towel in half with the wrong sides in, so your tags are going to be in. And we basically need to find the center of one of the long ends. So not this shorter end, but the long end, because you want the short end to wrap around them like a big hug. Okay, and now we're going to take our hood, and this is where we sewed together, and we're going to put that right inside the folded towel. We're going to overlap, about 1/2 inch. And then we're just going to pin that on. When we sew it, we're probably going to go from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fold that back and pin half. And then I'm going to flip it. And you just want to make sure it's overlapping about the same so that the hood is a nice size, and pin the rest of this together. So let me know in the comments if you're going to use this as a little side hustle or for your own kids or as a gift. Now, the hardest part of this project is sewing over that really fat fabric part where it's folded. So I don't like to cut it off. I just like to go really slow. And then I like to start before it. So you're going to start where you're just sewing onto the big towel, and then just go super, super slow over this thick part and pray that you do not break your needle or your thread. All right, we've got this. And then you can go faster once your foot is safely off of that big lump. Then you just want to keep moving everything so it's flat for the next few inches where you're going to sew, because right here is where we sewed this together. So it's not totally flat. You just need to keep manipulating it, keeping it flat in between your pins. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see more hooded towel options, how to make them maybe into a cute little dog face or another animal, or if this is fine, keeping it super simple. Let me know if you want to see more tutorials like this that are a little bit different and maybe a little bit more decorative or intricate. All right, now I'm back to the fat part again, so go really slow, and we're going to sew about 1 inch past there. And then we're going to turn, and we're going to go back the other way. Back here, so go real slow again, and then we're going to go about 1/2 inch to 1 inch over, and then we're going to knot it, and it will be all done. And the reason we went twice was just to give that towel a little bit more strength and stability for long-term use. And that is it. It is done. So, so simple. Here's what the inside looks like where we sewed it together. So this side you can see where the fabric overlapped a little bit. I didn't do that as perfectly as humanly possible, but again, it's on the inside. There's outside of the hood. These are really easy to fold. You're just going to fold it in half, just like a regular towel, except this one is going to have a hood. And it's good to go, or you can put the hood on the outside so you remember that this is one of the hooded towels.
Happy sewing and happy holidays.